It is a weird situation we find ourselves in. Hello, all. You'll find this. This is like those sci-fi movies where something goes wrong, something horrible's happened, and the message is found. When you see this, you'll know that such and such has happened. If you see this, you'll know we survived. But we've had to take these extreme, extraordinary measures to get this across. I don't know that you're hearing me or seeing me right now, but what has happened in our main show, the show that allows us to bring in guests from all over the world, the show that allows us to bring in opinions from everywhere, the show that allows us to share video with you, to share audio with you. That's all on a platform, right? And that platform is called StreamYard. And StreamYard is down. StreamYard's down across the country. StreamYard's down everywhere. So, and we know that only because we have been trying to get going here for a while. And so we've been knocking around the universe looking for others who are having a similar problem. And there are plenty of others. So, the reality is that all my compatriots will not be joining me. They can't. I can be with you, which is why I fired up the machine, but I cannot bring in any of the wonderful voices that I wanted you to listen to today. But I will tell you that as we continue to monitor the situation with our main platform, it may power back up and then everything will be as normal. But for now, I really appreciate your forbearance. I'm not happy about it either. But, and I don't know if you can hear, I don't know if you can hear this. Can you hear?
They do this to me all the time. I don't know what the hell they do it for.
Can you hear that? Did anybody hear that? Yeah. All right. So if you can hear that, that at least gives me like you can hear dings, right? You can hear that. This is good because it just okay, good. It lets me know sort of the breadth of things that I can do here. Sadly, I will not be able to share video with you, and I kind of wanted you to see some video, but as I say, we'll get powered up and go back and you'll see and hear everything we wanted you to see and hear. This is an extraordinary time in our nation's history, in the city of Los Angeles and the state of California's history, and in the history of the world, of course, with Donald Trump in power. And I think what's happening, just to kind of get to the serious stuff first, we had intended to, I was going to share with you, and I'll still share with you kind of descriptions of what happened at the Kennedy Center. They have the sort of rebooted Kennedy Center. They dry cleaned all the wokeism out. And these guys just platform on this wokeism thing. They just, they can't get that wokeism talking point out of their holster fast enough. So anyway, the new Kennedy Center has started, no more woke stuff. No more DEI stuff. The big DEI musical that was planned for the fall, I guess that's off. And Les Mis, Les Miserables, the outstanding show that I think plays on Broadway. I mean, you could argue it best musical ever, best musical of the modern age, whatever you want to say, best show of all time, whatever you want. So it's a strong choice. It was playing at the Kennedy Center last night, and we were going to show you that Donald Trump was booed when he came into the Kennedy Center hall. And to be fair to Trump, there were also people chanting USA, USA, but the boos were, palpable. The boos were really loud. So, he's a controversial figure, and he ain't loved even by the new Kennedy Center crew. And the new Kennedy Center crew got rid of, the old Kennedy Center crew, which really wouldn't have liked him. A lot of people canceled their memberships and their season subscriptions. Anyway, Trump was asked on the way in, and then I'll get to ICE, and I'm going to get to the troops, and I'll get to all that. But just on this weird thing, as I started by saying we were going to show you this, but we really can't, so I won't go. Now I'll just describe it. On the red carpet, it's the big red carpet premiere, Kennedy Center. Again, all those woke libs are gone. Now it's us right. Might is right in the new Kennedy Center. And he and Melania were on the red carpet. And again, I can't show you any pictures because this is a backup feed I'm giving you. But he was asked, who do you identify more with? Javert, who is the bad guy in Les Mis, or Jean Valjean, who is the good guy in Les Mis. Essentially, the Les Mis story, it's a Victor Hugo novel, is that Jean Valjean is this guy who stole a piece of bread so he could feed his family, something like that, right? And Javert is the lieutenant, the French police lieutenant who tracks Jean Valjean, and he wants to track him for the sake of justice. And the more we see Javert in every scene, the more sworn he is to destroy Jean Valjean. It's the two of them face off. And so it's kind of like saying, who do you identify with more, the bad guys or the good guys? There's no watching Les Mis and in any way confusing who you're rooting for. I mean, there's nobody rooting for the bad guy in Les Mis. There's no one rooting for Javert to catch Jean Valjean and jail him because he stole a piece of bread for his family. I mean, that literally is why Javert is tracking him and trailing him across Paris. So Trump is asked, who do you identify with more? And after saying, I've seen Les Mis countless times, we've seen it countless times. If you've seen it countless times, it should be pretty much a layup. Well, I identify with the hero, Jean Valjean. That's not what he said. He said, well, it's a tough question. I don't really know. It's a tough question. Boy, I'll leave that question to Melania. Do you want to take that? It reminded me of, what's your favorite passage in the Bible? Oh, they're all great. Read the Bible all the time. They're all great. And that was the thing that struck me, was that he does that thing where he goes, I've seen Les Mis over and over. We've seen it many times. You've seen it many times. Shouldn't be a tough one then. You identify with Jean Valjean. I mean, that's who you should aspire to identify with. Anyway, so it was classic Trump BSing and the kind of lunacy that we've sort of grown to expect. And then when he got in the hall, it was capped with the boos that Donald Trump received. Want to thank Mike Hall. I don't know if I can post, and I don't think I can, anything on the screen, sadly. But I want to post these things, and I'll put them off to the side and try to. Mike Hall, I want to thank you. $50 for the Kennedy Center and, of course, for the Mark Thompson Show. I'll be at the No King March tomorrow in San Francisco, making good trouble, he says. I thought the No King March is Saturday. Am I wrong? So when you say tomorrow, is there another one? Like there's a warm-up No King March that I didn't know about in San Francisco? If Rev P says, Inspector Javert seems nice. No, StreamYard is not down nationally, says Google. All of StreamYard's systems are currently operational, according to StreamYard's status page. I know, I looked at that same status page. Thank you, PT, but I'm telling you, based on what my people are saying, and I have the very best people, I do know the very best people. StreamYard is down. So, yeah, Albert's saying that StreamYard is down across the board. So Albert, thank you. We are, again, I don't know. we're at the mercy of
I blame
of
you.
the fates a little bit. Trevor blames Tony. Kim always blames me for everything. I always blame Albert for everything. So that is
Albert, thank you.
That is the order of things. But I wanted to play for you, and this is really the sad part. I had really sifted through a lot of video for today's show. And one of the things I wanted to play for you before I even got to the troops in Los Angeles was the address that Donald Trump made as he spoke to enlistees, and he spoke about the nature of America right now. And he was doing it at Fort Bragg. So Fort Bragg is a place that was stripped of the name Fort Bragg under the Biden administration. They renamed it because it was a Confederate luminary that Fort Bragg was named after. The Trump administration has renamed it Fort Bragg, but it's not the Confederate Fort Bragg. It's a different Fort Bragg. I mean, it's a different Bragg that's in Fort Bragg now. The idea was we want to get, clearly, the name Fort Bragg back, but we can't use the Confederate general's name or whatever he was. Braxton Bragg is this Confederate general. So for 100 years, the place was called Fort Bragg, right? They changed it to Fort Liberty. And I mention this because it's not nothing. It's kind of what is happening. It's an agenda item. So there was a defense secretary issued memorandum just this week on Monday, changing the name again to Fort Bragg. And Hegseth actually said in an announcement, that's right, Bragg is back. So Bragg, this Bragg, is a private first class with the 17th Airborne Division. And the DOD says he was a World War II hero who earned the Silver Star and Purple Heart for exceptional courage during the Battle of the Bulge. It's an ode to Bragg's service, it's suggested, and the military base gets that name back. So that's the backdrop for Donald Trump's speech. And the speech I really wanted you to see, and I have big chunks of it that I will share with you if we get back up on StreamYard, and even if we get no show back up today, full-blown show, meaning with video, with my ability to share these things, I will include bunches of it tomorrow because I really want you to see it. And here I will get to the point as to why. Trump made offensive political statements at this rally in Fort Bragg. He went after Biden, but like in rude ways to suggest that this new administration will bring back the might to America, and also kind of lays the ills as he's concocted them and also as he has perverted them, that is to say, facts about what's going wrong. The same way in Los Angeles, he talked about Los Angeles in the speech. In fact, I think he started with Los Angeles. He's concocted a narrative about what's going on in Los Angeles that sort of justifies and requires even the president to intercede because it's so out of control in Los Angeles. And as I told you before, then I'll return to his comments, I've been working in news in Los Angeles for 35 years. I've seen this city on the edge. In 1992, after the Rodney King verdicts, this city was on the edge. There were fires everywhere. People were being pulled out of their cars in certain neighborhoods. There was that truck driver, Reginald Denny, who was beaten horribly after being pulled out of his truck. It was a real period during which you thought anything can happen. You'll remember mostly Korean store owners sitting on the roofs of their businesses with guns trained on the street below to scare away looters. There was wild looting. All of that's to say, that was LA, and that was a situation where the National Guard was called in and really were needed. You really needed that presence. So I got nothing against calling in the National Guard if the city is really teetering. This is, as you know, this 4-block area. Now, I told you yesterday, and I will reiterate again, just because we're on it, I feel that they should be even more aggressive about making sure that store owners and a lot of property, stores and store owners are protected, and a lot of property is protected. I believe that one of the problems is that we tend to be too permissive when it comes to violence. I consider violence throwing rocks, throwing objects at cops, throwing things down on police vehicles. And as you know, I consider violence also the ways in which they are rounding up some of these people who ICE officers are taking down. So please, but right now I'm just talking about protesters. I'm just kind of giving you a sense of what's happening in Los Angeles. The handful of people, and maybe it's several hands full, I think they've made a total of 300 arrests. Good. I would be tough on all of these people who violate the basic tenets of peaceful protest. And there are agitators there, paid or otherwise. They are there. There are those who just enjoy mayhem. You know, those who kind of view it as, yeah, I don't have a stake in society. I'm angry at the cops. I'm going to go down there and with rocks and stuff you've broken off the curb that Trump talks about all the time, those pieces of cement are hurled at police officers and now military officers. So I've already said I'm very much for handling those situations strictly, aggressively, and completely. But that's a situation that doesn't require the National Guard. Again, I've been in Los Angeles for 35 years. I know what situations in this town require that kind of presence. So I can be both critical of the response, that is to say, I thought it was a bit on the insufficient side. I thought it should have been more muscular in protecting businesses particularly. I want to see these cities, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Sacramento, San Diego, and so on, New York, Chicago. I want to see all of these cities flourish. So for that reason, I want to see business owners who set up businesses in the city, I want to see them protected. And so, yeah, I want a muscular show from law enforcement for those who are trying to vandalize, tag, and loot these businesses. But that doesn't mean you need the National Guard, and it certainly doesn't mean you need the military. This is a concocted crisis, and it is being used for political purposes. And so we get back to his comments at Fort Bragg. He starts with Los Angeles. I mean, it's like an arsonist bragging about the fact that he's put out the fire. He started this whole thing. ICE came in heavy. You got reaction from the community, which you wanted. You took that small reaction, you amplified it, you stirred it up. You said, wow, law enforcement officers, ICE agents need protection. I'm going to bring in both the National Guard and I'm bringing in the Marines. And so when you talk about what's happening as you speak to those at Fort Bragg all around you, and I'll get to who's around him and how they chose those people in a second, you again politicize something that is political theater. You brought in the National Guard, Mr. President, and you brought in the Marines because it was theater. They're props for you in political theater. And that is offensive. These men and women who serve to try to protect this nation from foreign enemies, they serve in foreign theaters of conflict, they shouldn't be called upon, constitutionally shouldn't be called upon, and ethically shouldn't be called upon to view those in Los Angeles as the enemy. But that's exactly what's happening. And Moreover, if I can use that word, because I never had a chance to use the word moreover. Moreover, I would say you have offended the armed forces when you use them in political theater as props, in the same way that you used them as props when you were the president for the first 4 years and sent them to the southern border to handle this caravan invasion that was, again, completely concocted. You and Fox News Channel, all I heard about was the caravan. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. These immigrants are coming. They want to, it's going to be an invasion. We knew it was BS, right? But you sent the troops to the southern border to, again, it was almost cosplay. It's incredible. The cosplay is the ICE agents with they're all loaded up. To arrest somebody who's working in a slaughterhouse? You need your night vision goggles for that? I mean, it's offensive, isn't it? So when you get to these comments about Fort Bragg, that he made at Fort Bragg, I want to be clear, because he's not only referring to the political theater which he set up in Los Angeles, but he is speaking to the Fort Bragg audience and describing those in Los Angeles as the enemy, describing California as the enemy, the left, the woke left, the liberal, weak governor. He said these things. And the reason this is particularly disturbing is that it prepares these men and women who, again, are potentially heroic in their service to the country. It prepares them for occupying the streets of America. That's not what they're supposed to do. But you begin to turn their attention and focus toward the enemy in this country. When he talks about the woke liberals, he's talking about this country. You don't hear about Russian expansionism. You don't hear about the tinderbox that the Middle East is. You don't hear about the alliance that has served this country well and served the developed world well since World War II. You hear about the woke liberals in California. And if it weren't for me, the place would be on fire. That's what he's saying. On fire from protesters. He's talking to those who will be armed and serving in the military. He's talking to them about his fellow citizens and our fellow citizens who will... I'm sorry, I just got a message. I'm trying to figure out what's happening. Who will be seeing these troops, it would appear, in more and more American cities. This is his plan. He looks at the military clearly, based on his comments, based on his speeches, based on his disposition, based on his executive orders, based on what's happened in Los Angeles. He sees the military as his own personal military. He doesn't see them as the American military. And so these speeches that he makes, where he focuses on American cities, these speeches represent a real window into the future, and it's a dangerous one at that. Troops cheered and jeered as President Trump made political statements at this rally in Fort Bragg. During the speech, uniformed soldiers yelled in support of Trump's political statements, booed former President Joe Biden and California Governor Gavin Newsom. Do you think this crowd would have showed up for Biden? I don't think so, Trump said. Trump made other comments about Newsom, Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles, other comments about the, quote, fake news media, transgender people, protesters in California, flag burning. The flag burning also drew boos from the uniformed military members in attendance, I should say. Trump is known for his rallies at which he goes after and pokes fun at political enemies and other issues, but typically he makes those remarks at political events, not on U.S. military bases. Such overt political activity on a base like this is the prerogative of the commander-in-chief, but military leaders would typically frown upon troops reacting as they did, as it's inconsistent with military good order and discipline. And according to one expert, it is a violation of military regulations found in the Uniform Code of Military Justice, the UCMJ. You are seeing how that is changing. Again, these are my troops. There is only one code of conduct, and there is only one allegiance, and that is the allegiance to me. It's a sad tradition to use the military as a backdrop for political purposes, said Jeffrey DeWeese, who's a retired judge advocate general. He's now an attorney. And he's commenting as a former, what is that, JAG? To actively attack another president or sitting governor and incite the crowd to boo, that's a step in a dangerous direction that really says we want to politicize the military. And that sends a bad message. So the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, he's also testifying before Congress. These are Appropriations Committee testimonies primarily, in which he has to explain expenditures and the like, but he's been a mess. He doesn't know how much is spent, or he doesn't want to acknowledge it. His high ground is that it's classified. So Hegseth, who was also at this Fort Bragg address, he looks the other way on all of this. And as you know, he has pledged a kind of fealty to a divine vision almost of what he has in Donald Trump. I mean, he invokes Trump and his loyalty to Trump so frequently that it's sort of like, dude, back off a little bit. I get it. You're drunk on Trump. Got it. But that's, of course, what ensures his job. The interesting thing about the crowd that collected for the Fort Bragg speech is that they were cast like you'd cast The Apprentice, like you'd cast one of these shows that Trump is on, like you'd cast a movie. He took the podium before rows of young soldiers in camo-printed fatigues who'd been selected for their body shape and personal politics. It was a bit of stage design reflecting Trump's obsession with appearances and popularity, but it was highly unusual for the military, which has long sought to portray itself as indifferent to partisan politics. Military.com reviewed orders that were sent out in preparation for the event. One order repeatedly read, "No fat soldiers." The troops were reportedly told that they could object to being placed in the stands behind Trump if their personal values were in conflict with his politics. Trump's speech at Fort Bragg sounded no different from a campaign rally, they note here. The troops' reactions, similarly striking, cheered some of the president's most inflammatory remarks, such as when he characterized the immigration movement as an invasion. The other thing and the last thing I'll say is, if I told you this ahead of time, you'd go, come on, this isn't going to happen. They were selling Trump merch and MAGA merch at the Fort Bragg address. It's extraordinary. I mean, does it get tackier, more gross, more creepy than that? I mean, it's just, I don't know. Dude, you're not U2. You're the president of the United States. You know, you don't come on and go, merch's available in the lobby right after we're done. We're going to crap on some liberals and leftists, and then don't forget to pick up our new merch, hats and T-shirts. I add the British accent because I think it like that would be a rocker, you would say, you see. Yeah. That was the speech in Fort Bragg. But again, just to put a button on it, the reason it's of immense significance is because it is what we've been talking about since the entire situation went down in Los Angeles and even prior to that. Donald Trump, our president, wants to normalize and prepare troops in our military for occupying the streets of America later on in this movie. Right now, he's got them in LA. Again, completely unwarranted, completely unneeded, not requested. In fact, they are there despite the protestations of the governor, the mayor, and other public officials, and those in Washington who have commented on this as well. But that's only the beginning. Again, that Fort Bragg speech I thought was instructive because it prepares them for viewing Americans as the enemy, the left as the enemy, the libs as the enemy, the woke people as the enemy, the transgenders as the enemy. He's building the list of those who the military, who will be called upon to occupy other American cities, to accompany other raids. He's building that list for them so that they will feel okay with this incredibly radical change in the charter of military and military service in America. I'm looking at the chat. While ICE raids go on, nothing is being done about immigration reform by Republicans. Nothing, says Vilma. Yeah, of course that's true. And I'd suggest that the reality of that was already exposed in the last year of the Biden administration. They had a bipartisan immigration bill, and as you're well aware, it was the Republicans who KO'd it at the request of Donald Trump. The reason they requested KOing the bill, getting rid of it, scotching that bill, was because it was of political value, the immigration crisis at the border. Didn't want to give Joe Biden the win at all and make it look like he was doing anything on the southern border. That would have, if you were serious about this threat, not just using it as a talking point. I mean, clearly everything's theater. I mean, I've just gone through all the ways that he's using the military and in doing so much, using the military as props and doing so much as political theater. It's clear, right? But if you were serious about the immigration problem, you had that bill passed. It was a bipartisan bill, largely a Republican bill. Increase the number of immigration judges, increase the number of border patrol. And all those things were done in that first term, in that first Biden. It was the last year of Biden's term. And Trump said, no, we don't want it. Hula Steph, thank you for a $10 super chat. Continue on, Mark. Yeah, it's kind of weird. This is a show that normally would have, I'd be showing you a lot of video, sharing a lot with you. Can't do it. This is our backup plan to give you something on this Thursday. And of course, the distinguished former federal prosecutor David Katz is now a defense lawyer in Los Angeles. I was so looking forward to having him join. But right now, our StreamYard platform is down. So I'm waiting for a word from Kim, from Albert. And if we yeah, I'm just seeing messages from them now. And if we get StreamYard back up, we'll power back up on that platform. Senator Alex Padilla is forcibly removed from the Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem's news conference. He had questions for Trump's cabinet secretary during her press conference in Los Angeles. And Alex Padilla is removed forcibly. He was detained after trying to question Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. Here is the quote, "I am Senator Alex Padilla. I have questions for the secretary." That prompted several men to physically push him out of the news conference. Padilla's office shared a video of the incident. The video shows Padilla being taken into a hallway outside and pushed face forward onto the ground as officers with FBI identifying vests told the senator to put his hands behind his back. The officers then handcuffed him. DHS and Padilla's Senate office did not immediately return requests for comment. Noem is in LA to hold a press conference to address the ongoing demonstrations protesting President Donald Trump's hardline immigration policies, including U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement operations in the Southern California area. Senate Minority Chuck Schumer reacting to the video of Padilla. He said, quote, "I just saw something that sickened my stomach. The manhandling of a United States senator. We need immediate answers to what the hell went on," he said. Well, that ought to do it. The demanding of immediate answers. Newsom said, "This is outrageous, dictatorial, and shameful. Trump and his shock troops are out of control. This must end now." The Congressional Hispanic Caucus, of which Padilla is a member, also said, "This, of course, is unacceptable. We demand a full investigation and consequences for every official involved in this assault against a sitting U.S. senator." I do think that this is another level. It is absolutely another level. And what is said by Newsom is right. You may not be a Newsom fan, but you got to give it to him. This, I quote, I think says it. He said, "This is outrageous, dictatorial, and shameful. Trump and his shock troops are out of control. This must end now." And this goes to what I was saying. These troops, these FBI agents, these ICE agents, all of them having taken this sort of litmus test about January 6th, you know, that they didn't want anybody working anywhere in this administration who didn't accept the lie about the last election. That became the litmus test. It was the litmus test at the highest levels for people like Kash Patel. I mean, you didn't need to ask Kash Patel that because he was one of the guys who came up with the litmus test. But across the board. So there is an us versus them mentality here that's horribly dangerous. You see the excessive amount of force being used. The brutality is the idea. The thesis is be brutal, be scary, go in hot, more troops the better, flashbangs, tear gas, whatever you need. Go in like it's a Tom Cruise movie, man. We're trying to make a message. And that message has to be communicated to everyone. I think it's alarming because they'll start at the slaughterhouses and it's coming straight up to all of our houses. You may feel that I'm oversteering, overreacting. This is unprecedented, really unprecedented. Now, this the No Kings rally tomorrow, No King, the mass mobilization is 6:14 in San Francisco. Isn't that day after tomorrow? Okay, just want to be clear that. And of course, those rallies are going on all across America at the same time that military review, the North Korean military review. Happy birthday, dear dictator. Look at all of these troops. Look at all of this strength. And look at all your power. I mean, it's an absolute ego maniac's wet dream. Trump asked for it, and he got it. What was that MTV show where people who turn 16 have these birthdays? Do you know what I'm talking about? So there's an MTV show. I forget what it was called. Anyway, they have these insane over-the-top birthdays. I mean, these are wealthy people, and they put all their wealth on display for these birthdays, right? And that's kind of what we have in the president. He's like a 16-year-old kid, you know? Shows up to work occasionally, makes some pronouncements, does a bunch of stuff, calls the Marines in, then he goes to a UFC fight and says, "I want a big birthday, Dad. And I don't really care how much it costs. I want a big birthday." And so everybody's, "Yes, sir, of course. But we were just planning a big birthday for you, sir." And so that will be happening concurrently, right? That's the same time that all of these No Kings protests go on. Chaplain Fred with a $20 super chat. Thank you so much, Chaplain Fred. Hi, Mark. I'm just so confused and upset for Alex Padilla. We are seeing how Trump is after everyone who is against him. But let me see. We are seeing how Trump is after everyone who is against him. But what is more sad is how law enforcement is not reacting to what they are seeing and doing. Yeah, I agree. I mean, the complicity of law enforcement, this is kind of what I was getting at, is disturbing. I'll also just say this kind of as an overview. I think there is a general sense that Trump is on the side of the blue law enforcement, I mean. And, you know, the Democrats, they want to investigate police brutality, and the left cares, and they sort of, they want law enforcement, but then they won't let law enforcement do their job. That's sort of like the general, I think, framework in which everything is seen. Of course, the reality is, if Donald Trump and the Trump administration really cared about law enforcement, they wouldn't have pardoned 1,500 or 1,600 J6 protesters, many of whom beat law enforcement people within an inch of their life, actually produced injuries that led to deaths immediately following everything that went down at that protest at the Capitol. That was an invasion. That was an attempted coup. That was the kind of situation that desperately required the National Guard. And you didn't see National Guard troops anywhere near it because Donald Trump didn't invoke any power to knock that down. But back to the point, the framework that the right is for law enforcement and the left is for investigating law enforcement, it doesn't really hold water, because you see how Trump allowed heroic law enforcement officers to be brutalized the way they were, and there to be no repercussions, full pardons for all those involved. He didn't even go case by case. There was talk, as you know, and there's been a lot of reporting on this, that he was going to go case by case, or that they were going to review it case by case. There were public comments about it. Remember, they were asked ahead of time, are you going to pardon these J6 protesters? That was said during the campaign. And it was stated, well, we're going to go case by case. Certainly no one who's involved in any kind of violent protest will be pardoned. But then apparently Trump just said, just pardon all of them. Yeah, I mean, he probably had a golf game or something. There was the reason he had to go do something. Maybe his favorite show on Fox News Channel was on. I don't know. But I mean, to me, that was a degradation of everything that we admire in this culture, in this society. And when it comes to law enforcement, it degrades the notion that you care about law enforcement at all. So that was a situation where he didn't call in the National Guard. And as you say, law enforcement not reacting to what they are seeing, I almost have to take that in the specifics. Law enforcement is told to restrain, to limit, etc., protests and movements, and then they try to, I presume, respond to those as best they can. And when I say presume, I mean it's hard in the fog of protest and all this sort of thing. People hurling stuff at you, shouting stuff at you. This is a tough situation. You know what happened at Kent State. They brought in the National Guard at Kent State to anti-war Vietnam protesters. And those Vietnam protesters were angry. They wanted an end to the Vietnam War. They shouted things. They threw things. And finally, as I always say to you, because it's true, I mean, these National Guardsmen in this case, there were no women, I don't think, in the Guard at that point, they're human beings. You shout stuff and throw stuff at them, and eventually they killed people at Kent State. They killed 4 people. Students. Now, I would have said, before this even began, And I'm sure many did say, what the F was the National Guard doing in there with live ammo? That is absolute insanity for the reasons I cite. These are human beings. You have them in a situation where they may respond like human beings to the provocation, which was intense. So I saw that as a truly instructive moment, a tragic instructive moment. Now you get to today, the National Guard viewed as a prop, the military viewed as a prop by the president, and he just wants to pull them in from stage left or stage right whenever he can. And the fact that they've been carpet bombed on all the bases all around the world during the Trump administration, only Fox News Channel can be on, only the propaganda, only the right-wing propaganda can be on in all of the mess halls and all of the community meeting areas and all of the common spaces. The television is always on Fox News Channel. That's the propaganda. So if you view America as left and right, you don't view the people on the left as American as you are. You view them as the problem. You view these immigrants as invaders, regardless of what they're doing. I mean, they're going to the agricultural fields and just scooping up people who are picking strawberries. That's your immigration plan? You go to a slaughterhouse? Do you want to go work in the slaughterhouse, America? You won't find a lot of American citizens in slaughterhouses, just being straight about it. I remember that from COVID. Remember, we got a pretty good window on who works in slaughterhouses during COVID. These people who are in this country with no legal status are still employed in these slaughterhouses. And you'll remember, during COVID, they were ordered by the then president, Donald Trump, to go back into those slaughterhouses, despite the threat of COVID, and work. And during that same executive order, Trump included an indemnification for slaughterhouse owners, such that if anybody got sick and there were complications and even death involved, they couldn't be held legally liable. It was an executive order. Go look it up. It was in the first Trump term at the beginning of the COVID-19 outbreak. So now you go to these slaughterhouses where these people already have desperately awful lives, and you scoop them up with the ICE raids. They come in heavy. They come in hot. And they arrest these poor people who are working at the stinking slaughterhouse. This place of death and blood and terror for these creatures that are led through this thing. And now it's a place of terror for those who work there. It's despicable. It's despicable. That's your immigration plan? Go get the strawberry pickers and the slaughterhouse workers? You want to come after the sanitation workers next? You want to go storm another restaurant with 9 ICE officers before you even open? Happened in a high-end restaurant in Washington, D.C. You're looking to shake down the kitchen crew? Some poor guy from Honduras, 19 years old, working in some S-hole, and you're going to grab him, cuff him, throw him to the pavement, because the brutality is part of it. I think, sadly, the immigration issue, I've made this point repeatedly and I'll make it again, is a winner for Donald Trump. I think maybe many of you watching and listening care about the immigrants, care about the contribution they're making. I'm talking about people who have no real legal status here. I mean, let's be honest. Let's be really honest. Something that Trump is not being when he talks about Mar-a-Lago. Mar-a-Lago populated by a bunch of people who are not in this country legally. It's the same hypocrisy about China. I want to have everything made here in this country, depend too much on China. I'm putting these tariffs in. We shouldn't be dealing with China when it comes to industry. All of the Trump stuff, all that stuff is made in China. His ties, his hats. I don't know. You can tell me maybe in the last couple of months they found a plant in this country just because it's such a bad look to have all of his stuff made in China, but that's where it was made. China, Vietnam, not in America. And so when we talk about what's happening in this country, we can talk about Mar-a-Lago and Bedminster Course and all of his other resorts, and they're populated by people who are not here in this country with legal status. That's the president. Not all of them are from south of the border. There was great reporting on this during his first administration, during which it was pointed out that he has many workers from Romania, from places sort of in Europe where you wouldn't necessarily associate gig workers or restaurant workers as necessarily being from, and he has them employed in large numbers at Mar-a-Lago. Now, again, that was during the first term. I don't know if he's updated it and, sifted through because it is such a bad look. But the idea somehow that we don't need these people doing these jobs, it's absurd. The entire American economy on some level, on one level, is dependent on these workers. The industries affected by pulling these workers out of California are manifest. The agricultural business to start. Go up and down the Central Valley. I told you about that experiment. It was maybe 11 years ago, a dozen years ago, where they tried to get Americans, they put agricultural jobs, this is jobs in the agricultural fields of California, they put those up as jobs available to Americans. I think at the time, they were paying $25 to $30 an hour. They actually got some Americans to work. When I say Americans, I'm talking about American citizens who went into the fields to pick lettuce, pick strawberries, etc. They didn't even last 2 weeks. That's how harsh the conditions are. It's not a good job. It's not a good job in the slaughterhouse. It's not a good job in the agricultural fields. It's not a good job in the heat of the kitchen. It's not a good job cleaning up public toilets. Those aren't great jobs. And they're done by a mix. Some people who are here legally, some people who are American, Caucasian, and some are, in large measure, many are Latino. And they belong to unions, and they pay taxes, and they help support the state of California. And that's why I say these actions on the part of ICE and this president, these heavy-handed actions, they will have a chilling effect, and they'll have an effect on industry, and it will affect the California economy and, by extension, the American economy. These are scary times. They're scary times. That's the economic side, but there are real people involved here. They're earnest people. They're trying to make a living, a modest living, and they're not a blight on our society. None of them. Now, you want your violent criminals. He always advertises the violent criminals. That's all we hear about. And then those talking points are echoed on Fox News Channel. All we hear about is the violent criminals, the insane asylums, etc. Well, you know that that's a minuscule number. A minuscule number of people. We always heard the first million will also all be violent criminals, Mark. They're all going to be violent criminals. We're going to be glad that first million. Then the next 9 million, what we're going to do is then we'll just take it case by case. Will you? Case by case? Is that why you go in hot to the fashion district in Los Angeles? The effing fashion district? Come on. Fashion district, slaughterhouse, Home Depot. It's disgusting. It should be embarrassing. That's where we are, though. And then I take you back to my original thoughts about what's happening with this president and the way that Pete Hegseth echoes the president's general disposition toward the politics of the military and preparing the military for occupation of American cities. This is where we are. It's utter insanity. And it's scary. So, the other thing I'll just say about the Marines deployed to LA, the idea is that they will protect federal officers who are doing their job. And the federal officers are doing their job to scoop up, arrest, and deport. I mean, the officers won't deport them. They'll arrest these people who are in the country illegally. And the determination as to whether or not they're in the country illegally that'll be handled in a court. So, for the day, they're closing down businesses. They're, destroying families. I say destroying family. I mean, it's destructive. Imagine mom or dad or both being arrested, separated. There's a recklessness to all of this that's so consistent and so on brand. The same way Elon Musk went in and recklessly dismantled government, fired all of the people who are associated with USAID, EPA, goes into the IRS, scrapes those systems for data on Americans, it goes into the Social Security Administration, does the same thing. There's just a recklessness. That's just a few of the things that he did. But that same recklessness is being applied now. It's really the only way they know how to operate. It's so sloppy. I mean, it's funny. Pete Hegseth is testifying before Congress, and he was asked, what is your backup plan? What is your backup plan in various scenarios that he's laid out? There is no backup plan. I'll share that video with you when we go back to our main platform. Again, we're on a temporary direct-to-YouTube platform today, so I can't share a lot of the stuff that I had queued up and ready to go, but we will. I'll get it all to you in the days ahead. So, the reason I wanted to talk to David Katz and may bring him in tomorrow, I may actually record something and I'll drop it as a separate video a little bit later, so kind of watch this space. I wanted to bring David Katz in for the legal questions around bringing in the National Guard and having them in any way involved in the arrest and detention of civilians. I think you get into a problematic legal area when you do that. So the idea somehow that you can go into LA, New York, Atlanta, Chicago, you can bring these ICE agents in and then have them sort of running shotgun, the National Guard, with all of these raids. I don't know about that. I'm not so sure you can do it. I know they can't make arrests, so it's their presence that works. And I've told you, if you just are getting here, I'll just reiterate. I believe that the leaders of Los Angeles should have been more aggressive in knocking down what I consider violence. You throw cinder blocks at police cars, et cetera. You throw any objects at police, et cetera. Tagging, I include all of that. I think they should have been more aggressive in knocking that down. And you know where I sit on this immigration issue. I just gave you a whole, chapter and verse on it. But when it comes to public property and private property, I think you got to be tough. I want to know that my city's a safe place, and we're not going to take that. So I think that was a fail on the part of local leadership. Now, that doesn't mean that you needed any of this other stuff. This other stuff is obviously political theater. You didn't need the National Guard. You didn't need the Marines. And more, the way it was done makes it clear that it was political theater, right? Didn't coordinate it with the governor, didn't coordinate it with local officials like the mayor of Los Angeles, just did it. Because that's the political theater. Those guys are idiots. I'm here. I'm going to assert myself on this situation. That is as important as the troops themselves. It's part of the theater. It's part of the narrative that the Trump administration wants to establish. The left, they're idiots. They're feckless. They're ruining your city. Oh my God, you'd be done if it weren't for us. Let me tell you, I didn't even talk to those guys. They're the enemy. I just sent in the troops. That's the message he's sending also to, as I've mentioned, and I'm going to mention it over and over, those Fort Bragg military people who patiently waited. Some cheered, some jeered the ex-president Biden. That's the message. Newsom, Bass, the left, the Democrats, you don't need to pay attention to them. They're the enemy. The soul of America rests with us, the righteous. You're doing our bidding, and you'll do it on the streets of America because that's where the battle now must be waged. That is what he is saying. And that's scary. Again, no mention of Russia, no mention of the Ukraine conflict, no mention of the Middle East, no mention of the South China Sea. I mean, there's so many areas, the Iran thing could boil over any moment. But he's more concerned with the political theater of demonizing the opposition and creating the very real notion that the opposition is so much the enemy that you should feel okay as a military enlistee. You should feel okay going to America's cities and lining up against our own citizens. It's scary. We'll be protesting in our little city of Dublin on Saturday, says Kathleen Marshall with a $50 super chat. Thank you for that. No kings, no dungeons. Thank you for all you do. We need you. Thank you, Kathleen Marshall. Love that. Really cool. I hope the curfew stays for at least a week, says Shadow Producer Calvin Wong. I am looking at this is something we do on the channel, of course, typically regularly when I'm there joined by Kim and all the rest. But now I have to just kind of do it in the moment. It's just me today. Thank you again for the super chats, for the super stickers, and also for just the thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. Hey, hit the notification bell if you would, and you'll know whenever we drop a video. And I mentioned that particularly today because, again, today I'm dealing with this huge technical outage, but I want to record something with David Katz, the former federal prosecutor, will weigh in. He's one of the great legal analysts in the English-speaking world, and he will lay out the legalities of what's going on. And I know you've heard a lot about the legalities, but let me say that there is a little wiggle room for this administration, potentially, in my lay judgment, legally. And I'd suggest that David Katz's opinion today is really relevant. So I'm going to ask you to hit the notification bell so you'll know when I release that video with him. That conversation should be later today, I hope, if I can book him. The deal with Pete Hegseth and his position toward all of this, as you know, he's the Fox and Friends weekend host, getting that big promotion. He is now backing up President Trump in everything that President Trump does. He is Trump's boy. And on the deployment of troops to Los Angeles, you'll be not in the least bit surprised to find he thinks it was lawful. Sadly, just couldn't cite the law that he was following. But it's right there in the Constitution. Great. Tell me where in the Constitution. Several lawmakers, this is a Senate budget hearing, okay? So when you talk about like the amount of money that stuff costs, like how much money it costs to put the military in Los Angeles, how many military members had to be fed, had to be housed. Of course, there were no provisions made for all of that. The whole thing was done haphazardly. I told you before. Everything in this administration is half-assed. So it's what happens when you just play the theater of being in charge. Yeah. We've got the prisons. We know we can scoop up the soft targets that are house workers and agricultural workers and people working in the fashion district and Home Depot. Those are soft targets, right? Those aren't violent criminals. They're no blight on society. They're actually critical parts of society, aren't they? But no one wants to say that. So Hegseth can't even tell you how much that cost. It was asked by a number of people in this appropriations hearing. But when asked about sending thousands of troops to LA, including 700 active duty Marines, he said it's legal. Oh, yeah, it's legal. It's right there in the Constitution. And he was asked to explain the legal underpinning of it. Okay. And he said, I have to pull up the specific provision. This is in speaking with Tammy Baldwin from Wisconsin, senator from Wisconsin. Quote, but our Office of General Counsel, alongside our leadership, has reviewed and ensured in the order that we set out that it's completely constitutional for the president to use federal troops to defend federal law enforcement. So Baldwin said, show me the order. Was that in the order? You say it was. Show me where in the law it's legal to have the active duty military there. And he said, it's in the order, ma'am, but we'll make sure you get it as well. I mean, he took a lot of static in this committee hearing, a lot of questions about domestic deployments, research budget cuts, the impact of tariffs on the defense industrial base. Republicans didn't mention LA a lot. And it was Hegseth who said that the deployments to LA and the southern border, there are 13,000 National Guard and active duty troops involved in those things. That is to say, the southern border and in LA. They're necessary to protect the country. We very much support President Trump's focus on defending the homeland on our southern border, he said. Let me just say one thing, if I can step out of the movie for a second. I have to tell you, I hate the word homeland. I hate it. It started, I think, around George Bush, the younger George Bush's presidency, but somebody may be able to go back and actually
Google it,
find it, where it started here. The homeland reminds me of an Eastern Bloc country where everybody's trying to get out. The homeland reference reminds me of Nazi Germany, the homeland, Deutschland. It should be erased from the American vernacular, certainly from the governmental vernacular. It should not be used. It sickens me every time I hear it. And it's become one of those things that is sort of boilerplate politics, where a lot of politicians will say, the people of the United States, I think this is what's required, and this is what the people of the United States of America want. They'll just tack it on. Sounds good. The people of the United States of America. Yeah, the people of the United States of America. Yeah, protect the homeland. Why not just say protect the nation? I mean, I'm not even being critical of whatever you're saying. I'm just saying this homeland thing is bad. But it's too late. That horse is out of the barn. I mean, we've got a Department of Homeland Security, and it's being run by someone who is vacuous and moronic and who just looks for photo ops and knows nothing about shaping policy and being smart about this, and turns on a dime. I showed you the video when she's talking to Sean Hannity, angry at Biden as he was making rumblings in her view about nationalizing the National Guard. Traipsing all over states' rights. Sean, this is an outrage. Typical Democrats. They don't respect states' rights. Joe Biden wants to nationalize the National Guard. He wants to take control of the National Guard over what a sitting governor wants. Well, that's exactly what's going on now, and now what she's saying. Donald Trump is very much in his right to do this. Absolutely. Article 10. I mean, there's just no there. So, again, these people who are chosen because they are on the medal stand anyway, if they're not gold medalists when it comes to sucking up to Trump, they're on the medal stand and they so impress the president with their sucking up that they get these appointments. This is who you're dealing with, and that's who she is, Kristi Noem. I mean, I'm looking at the Iran situation, which is, I think it's teetering. I mean, there is a real possibility that the Israelis could initiate a preemptive strike against Iran and their nuclear plant. And then you're going to see a retaliation on the part of the Iranians, they've already said, on American targets in Iraq. Marco Rubio has already told a bunch of people who are involved with American assets over there, they should leave. So, I mean, everybody's kind of braced for impact on this, right? Do you know who's handling the diplomacy for America on Iran and the Middle East? It's not somebody with any kind of Middle Eastern diplomacy background. It's not somebody with any kind of knowledge of history in the region. It's a guy who is a real estate mogul. He's a huge donor to Donald Trump. He golfs with Donald Trump all the time. That's who's handling the Middle East negotiations. He is the diplomat through which we get all of these communications. When you talk about Trump trying to kind of put the Iranian nuclear deal back together, you know, we had an Iran nuclear deal. It was negotiated under Barack Obama. But in Trump season 1, he came in and he destroyed that right away. Anything that was Obama, right, he destroyed. So in destroying that, he lost the connection to the Iranians in terms of restraining their nuclear ambitions. And now he's kind of trying to put Humpty Dumpty back together again and wants to just put his name on it. Look, new Trump Iranian nuclear deal, which is great, dude. If you can do it, do it. But my point is simply, you had it and you S-canned it. So the idea now that this has to be put back together by his leading negotiator, well, that puts a lot of pressure on that negotiator. And that negotiator isn't a diplomat prior to this, not any kind of background in any of these areas in which he has to be handling things and actually run lead. He's a real estate mogul. He's a real estate mogul who golfs with Trump. And he's a real estate mogul, although, just to, as an aside, point out, whose son is in business with the president's son. They run World Liberty Financial together. That's the platform on which you can buy and sell crypto and the Trump meme coin. So you see that even in the inner workings of the government, there's self-dealing and conflict of interest everywhere. But as this Iranian thing teeters, it would be nice to have some real diplomats in there with some real deep knowledge of what's going on. We don't have that. We have a real estate mogul. I'm not talking about Trump. I'm talking about his lead diplomat to the Middle East. All this crap is being handled by a bunch of amateurs. They're amateur loyalists, and that's all they have to show for it is loyalty to Donald Trump. And the price we pay could be immense. George W. started after 9/11. This is on the homeland thing. Thank you, Scott Rittenberg. I was saying I like to get rid of the word homeland. I think it's just it reminds me of Nazi Germany, honestly. George W. started after 9/11. Native Americans, I know, hate that word too. Please don't lose this voice. I worry. Yeah, I worry too. I don't know. I don't, yeah, I know that, Citizen Swain saying he's a reality TV showman, not a mogul. It's Mark Burnett's fault completely. Yeah, I think when I'm talking about diplomats and when I'm talking about the mogul part, the successful real estate fortune is what this guy who is negotiating and trying to protect us in sensitive negotiations with the Iranians in the Middle East. That's who that guy is. That's the guy who's a successful real estate guy. But no, you're right. Trump is a complete imago. He's a complete concocted theatrical character. But by the way, to be fair to Trump, as I've said, and I don't know how many of you have seen the show before. Maybe you're just passing through. But Trump is a generational political figure. Now, you can hate him, and I understand why these are hateful, loathsome, grotesque notions that he's brought to life, the worst of America, but he's done it with a smooth and unapologetic con. And a lot of Americans disgruntled with something, disgruntled with their lives, disgruntled with the economy, angry at them. Just show me who the them is, because I know I'm angry. Give me a them. It's those people. They're taking your jobs. They're taking your lifestyle. They're taking your religion. They're taking what you thought was America. They're taking it all. He sold that. I mean, it helps that he just makes stuff up. All these guys make stuff up. I gave you the video the other day from the labor secretary. That's who it was. Remember the labor secretary? She was on with Maria Bartiromo. Maria Bartiromo, who looks great, by the way, which is amazing, because I didn't think you could crawl so far up somebody's ass as she did with Trump, come out and still look as good as she does. But anyway, she's talking to this labor secretary who is who's talking about, if I'm remembering this right, maybe it was Stuart Varney, it was one of these things. They're talking about the manufacturing jobs lost under the Trump administration so far. 8,000 manufacturing jobs lost just last month. That's in 1 month. So for all this onshoring, we're going to make stuff work here. We're going to incentivize industry here in this country. We lost 8,000 industry jobs last month. So she answers by going, well, actually, everything seems to be going well. Things are holding steady. And she's just kind of filling time. It's like clearly bunk. And then she finishes it, and this is the best part to me, with, and tens of trillions of dollars are coming into America now that weren't coming in before. Tens of trillions. That means more than 10 trillion. Tens of trillions means minimum 20 trillion, but I'll take 10 trillion. It's all crap. It's just totally bogus, void of any reality. It's just out there. And that's what these people do. That's what the labor secretary is doing. She's filling time and spinning lies. And so Donald Trump, who's much better than the labor secretary, Trump is good. Trump is solid. He speaks unapologetically. He lies right to your face, and it feels so real. You can't believe that it's not real. And talking about the Newsom call, and talking about the money coming in, and talking about the deal that is just made with China, and talking about all the deals he's made. It's all just beautifully, unblinkingly confident. And that's what sold so many Americans. That's how we ended up here. So when you don't care about referencing any actual fact, you can spin this stuff. And then I have to also say, and this is something that, sorry, I know I'm up against a lot of the visitors who come to our show who have all the faith in the American people. I have faith in the American people. I don't have any faith in the American people. None. I mean, he says, I'll stop the war in Ukraine on day one. It may stop even before I take office. People believe that. I used to say, he's a passive, Mark, he's anti-war. That's what I like about him. He's going to get us out of these wars. Dude, what leader, an aspirant, somebody who wants to be president, is pro-war? Is that a big thing? I didn't realize yeah, exactly. Nobody. Everybody's anti-war. They'll all tell you how they're going to establish the peace. I mean, during the Vietnam War, they were talking about how they were going to wind down the war, had a plan for ending that war. Afghanistan was another thing. You read the Afghanistan papers, maybe you read excerpts of them. Afghanistan was like Vietnam. They knew that there was no end, that our presence in Afghanistan was going to be open-ended, and money and casualties, that was just going to be part of it year after year after year, 20 years there. So realities and what's stated can be different. And when it comes to war, everybody's pitching themselves as for peace, right? But just pulling back all American troops from every place, again, I don't see that. It's messy, it's reckless. That's not considered, you know. I did want to mention the poll, though. The latest polling you might find both interesting, instructive, maybe it's just a blip, but wow. There is, I think, maybe the first signs of something you can look at. But even as I say that, I will tell you that there might be a footnote to it. So let me get it for you. And then I'll recognize a few people because Kim is very beautifully helping me with super chats and super stickers, and people have said things we want to respond to. Trump on polling is underwater on some of his top issues, including immigration. President Donald Trump, according to a new Quinnipiac University poll released yesterday, is underwater on some of his most favorable issues. Immigration and the economy are the two that helped vault him into power. The poll shows that Trump's approval rating at 38% among registered voters is a 3-point drop from April. He's also losing support on subjects that were crucial to that victory, as I say, the one in November. On immigration, an issue that the president hammered on the campaign trail, Trump's approval rating drops 5 points from April to 43%. His already low approval rating on the economy didn't budge, remains at 40. The results show a majority of voters, 54%, disapprove of Trump's handling of the economy. The poll surveyed almost 1,300 self-identified registered voters from June 5th through the 9th, and a margin of error of plus or minus 2.8%. His approval rating had been steadily picking up after dropping significantly in April. So the big, beautiful bill legislation, how does that poll? 53% of voters polled did not support the legislation. That's over half by 3%. Divided among party lines, 67% of Republicans supported, while 89% of Democrats and 57% of independents opposed it. On Medicaid funding, an issue that has become Democrats' messaging priority, 47% of those surveyed thought funding should increase on Medicaid, while 40% thought it should stay about the same. Only 10% think that federal funding should decrease. The bill, as passed by the House, is estimated to end Medicaid coverage for millions of people. Quinnipiac also asked voters what they think of billionaire Elon Musk, and his approval rating is crashing among Republicans after his public breakup with Trump. Among Republicans, 62% had a favorable view of Musk, a 16-point drop from April. But while Trump's approval languishes, again, Democrats don't poll well either. So it's by no means clear that Democrats could take advantage of this. A vast majority of voters, 70% of voters, disapprove of the way Democrats in Congress are doing their jobs. 20% approve. That's 12 points lower than how voters viewed Republicans in the same survey. So you begin to see the work cut out for Democrats. It's messaging. It's having to reconstitute that party in some way. On sending in the National Guard, a new Survey from the Washington Post and George Mason University Schar School. The results as follows. President Trump's choice to send the National Guard and Marines to respond to the protests in Los Angeles, 44% oppose Trump's choice to send in the National Guard and Marines. 41% support it. 15% say they are unsure how they feel about it. Republicans in the survey are more likely to support Trump's action, apparently. 86% supporting Trump's bringing the Guard and the Marines to L.A. Democrats oppose it 76%. And as I say, the support on the Republican side is 86%. But political independents break toward opposing. 48% of independents oppose, 33% support, and 19% are unsure. The survey also finds near even splits over views of the protests themselves. 39% support the protests in LA. The protests against the federal government's immigration enforcement is the way the survey was asked. And 40% opposing those protests. Against 39 supporting, 40% opposing, 21% unsure. Americans also split over whether these protests have been mostly peaceful. 35% say mostly peaceful, 37% say mostly violent. And I think these are just a snapshot, obviously, as most polling is, but again, instructive on big issues that Trump won on and is now maybe hitting some headwinds on. Deployment of troops to help with a flawed immigration policy. Again, I call it flawed. It's not even really a policy. I mean, I guess it's a policy because he's doing it and it's a strategy and there's a blueprint laid out for the future. You've got Stephen Miller, who's, shaking up the snow globe everywhere he can. Get me 3,000 scalps. I just want them. I don't care where you get them. Go to Home Depot. Go to where they hang out. Go to a taco stand. I don't care. I want those Latino faces. That is essentially what Stephen Miller's position is. Don't worry about that violence thing. That was just something we were doing to get into office. We're not going to find a lot of violent criminals. Just get me anybody. Well, the American people are beginning to see that. I mean, based on this polling, again, just a remark on the poll. And so it's becoming a bit of a troubled policy. The other thing that's happening, of course, is that RFK Jr., who got rid of all the vax committee. I mean, again, that committee on vaccines was populated by people who read all of the scientific literature. I'm saying that's something that I don't think RFK Jr. does. I just don't think so. I mean, look at how that 76-page report discussing what was going on at HHS, look at how it was produced. It was produced by AI. And you could have written it. You just go into ChatGPT and say, I want a 76-page report on the general direction that HHS is moving, and you put in a lot of stuff and with an emphasis on vaccines and pandemics. It's easy to do. We all know how to do it. And then 10 seconds later, you'll have that report. And that's exactly what they did. And we know that because in that same report, there were 7 studies that they cited that were completely made up, completely fictitious. That's who's running HHS. A guy who is not only pulling it out of his ass, but then he's serving it on a plate adorned with a bunch of AI. So his new hires, after he's gotten rid of all of those scientists who on that team of those evaluating those vaccines, read all those reports, put all that science through a rigorous examination. All those people are gone. Now you have new people on board. 17-member panel erased of all of those people, all of them were bad? The new people include a scientist who researched mRNA vaccine technology, transformed into a conservative darling for his criticisms of the COVID-19 vaccines. He's a leading critic of pandemic-era lockdowns. That's how all these people found each other. They found each other during COVID-19. There may be many of you. I have people I know, friends, family, whose entire political perspective is informed by COVID-19 and the regulations and mandates around COVID-19 and vaccines. The lockdown, the masks, the vaccines. I know a lot of people, and I'm sure you do too. Their entire political world perspective is informed by that. They're, in a way, single-issue voters. And so what you see now is the logical extension of this. So as I mentioned, you have that guy who I talked about, the guy who was involved with criticisms of the COVID-19 vaccines, becomes this leading critic of pandemic-era lockdowns, and now he's part of the new crew as we've recast HHS. Kennedy's decision to retire the previous 17-member panel, as noted here, was widely decried by doctors' groups, public health organizations, who feared the advisors would be replaced by a group aligned with Kennedy's desire to reassess and possibly even end long-standing vaccination recommendations. The new appointees to the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices include Dr. Robert Malone, the former mRNA researcher who emerged as a close advisor to Kennedy during the measles outbreak. And speaking of measles outbreaks, we have more of them now than we've had in decades because people are buying the BS around the measles vaccines. So this is what's happening and a slice of what's happening in Washington. I also wanted to mention this. Apparently the word is that David Katz, who would be normally on at this time, will join tomorrow for a few minutes. So we'll be able to get David Katz on and be able to ask him about the very substantial and I would say dangerous legal issues that are raised by what's happening in Los Angeles now and by invoking powers and relationships with the military for domestic surveillance, for domestic presence, for domestic law enforcement that we've never seen. So, Surf and Tumbleweed, thank you for a $13 super chat. Wow, thank you, Rev P. You sound great, Mark. Much love, brother. Much love to you. And a shout out to you.
Big shout out
to both of you. Surf and Tumbleweed, Rev P, Harry Magnan. On Les Mis, and do you identify, which was the question to Donald Trump, with Javert or Jean Valjean? It should be a layup. What are you kidding? The good guy or the bad guy? Harry Magnan says, I can see Trump supporting stealing bread from a family. Yeah, he, to support his family, though, is what Jean Valjean. Mike Hall with a $50 super chat. Thanks so much,
big
Mike.
shout out.
$50 for the Kennedy Center and, of course, for the Mark Thompson Show. I'll be at the No King March in San Francisco making good trouble. Vilma with a $4 super chat. While ICE raids go on, nothing is being done about immigration reform by Republicans. Nothing. Exactly. Because immigration reform doesn't really interest them. It's all performative. And sadly, there's a real price being paid. But I've told you, the price you're going to pay economically in California and across the country is immense. This is a huge part of the dark economy of America. Hulu Steph, continue on, Mark. Yeah. Thank you, Hulu Steph, for that $10 super chat. And Croquet Film. Les Mis is ironically woke, says Croquet Film. Nullifidian. The turd man of Alcatraz, Nullifidian caller. I'm not a big name caller. I don't call the dude any names or make fun of his hair or his weight or anything. I don't really do that stuff, but I guess you guys are having at it. The turd man of Alcatraz wants to put up a couple of flagpoles at the White House to distract us from his flagging poles. I got what you did there. I love it. Big tuna for you, $10. Have you seen the Craigslist ad for seat fillers in Washington this Saturday? Yes. Let me spend 30 seconds on this. For Saturday's review stand, those who are going to be behind Trump on the review stand, I've seen the Craigslist ad. They'll give you $1,000 to sit on the stage. It'll be crypto that they'll send you to be a seat filler behind the president. But I wasn't sure how real that was. That's why I didn't report it earlier in the show. But in response to your question, I will mention it is out there. Check it out. Maybe you can tell me whether you think it's real.
Google
I saw it on TikTok. I saw it across social media. So, Joan Hollywood. Who's popping out of Trump's birthday cake? That's a great. Well, I would hope it would be Janine Pirro. Yeah. Mr. President, I'm here for you. Chaplain Fred, on the Alex Padilla thing, the Alex Padilla rough arrest, put in cuffs today as he was just trying to ask a question of Kristi Noem. I'm sure it was an argumentative question, don't get me wrong. Chaplain Fred, with a $20 super chat, says, I'm just so confused and upset for Alex Padilla. We are seeing how Trump is after everyone is against him. But what is more sad is how law enforcement is not reacting to what they are seeing and doing. A lot of law enforcement is just, and it's really set up this way, having to follow the orders of those who are in charge. So, I give the men and women of law enforcement a little bit of a break. I sure wish they would go easier on many of these people that they are arresting. I don't like this kind of nightclub bouncer attitude that a lot of these law enforcement ICE agents have. I just think it's not cool. It doesn't have to be done that way. These are sweet people who are working on an effing slaughterhouse, man. I mean, you don't have to. Where's your humanity? I get that you have to do your job, but I also think there can be some humanity. Run amok. What makes these Trump people think their Second Amendment right will stand when the military comes to town? Well, of course, that argument I've made for years. The idea somehow, we need to arm ourselves just in case the government comes out. If the government comes after you, I don't really care how you've armed yourself. You're done. Dystopian Dragon. Senator Padilla has been arrested. Padilla gave a press conference after that he said he was not arrested. He was detained for asking a question, pushed out of the room, shoved to the ground, zip-tied. He said, we will hold this administration accountable. I hope so. I don't think that they're much in the being held accountable department. Kathleen Marshall says, we will be protesting in our little city of Dublin on Saturday. Thank you for the $50 super chat on that, too. Really appreciate you supporting the channel. This is an extraordinary day where our normal cast of characters isn't here and the normal multimedia presentation that we bring you isn't available to us. So really appreciate your support. Scott in Rittenberg says, almost like the radio days. This is to sponsor an official The Mark Thompson Show vocal break. And Stephen Ward, $10 with his super chat. Convicted of 34 felonies makes Chump a felon. Chump is not above the law. President felon, and yet he is not in prison. When the law does not apply to everyone, then the law applies to no one. Comment from Randy. Did you see the Trump Truth Social post this morning where he acknowledges that these deportation raids are starting to affect farmers and other segments of the economy? Who could have known? Deirdre Lozica, the young Department of Homeland Security thugs zip-tied Padilla while he was face down on the ground. Yeah, as we reported. Thank you, everybody who has filtered into comments and also supporting us today. I want to mention one thing about the felony because it was just mentioned by, who mentioned it? Just the felony thing. Oh, it was a Scott Rittenberg. No, it was It was Stephen Ward. So you're right. Trump convicted of 34 felonies. We can talk about the convictions and the cases, and you know how I stand on it. I would have absolutely moved forward with the classified documents case. It would have been tried in Washington, D.C. if I had been in charge. Again, I know a little bit through David Katz that it could have been charged that way. I felt it was the easiest slam dunk case. It was easy to understand. There was no excuse for it. Why are you taking thousands of documents to your place in Mar-a-Lago, stored in completely unsecure areas? First of all, Mar-a-Lago's in insecure area, an unsecured area. It's in a bathroom is the first tranche of documents. The second tranche and multiple tranches are in bedrooms, in ballrooms, in closets, in a work area that many people have access to. These are sensitive documents. So I thought that was an easy case to make, and and they actively moved documents when the FBI served them with subpoenas. So I really thought, wow, this is really an easy case to make. But because of a jurisdictional issue, they were in Florida. They get the concierge judge from Florida to basically let Trump off the hook on that. And now, of course, all of this goes away. That was the potentially felonious act and case that should have stuck to Trump. The 34 felony counts, all right, but it is what it is. But now to your question and why I mention all of that. Trump is bothered by the felony thing. So even as we can play it off, and it is played off as, well, it was the libs, they weaponized he's bothered by it. And he's trying now in court to get those felonies erased from his record. And so far, he hasn't been able to do it. But when you mention those felonies, it does land with him. And he is trying all he can to get those felonies erased from the public record. We'll see how successful he is. But there are government lawyers and Trump lawyers working on it now. So, what a weird day, huh, everybody? A truly weird day.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I will tell you that we'll be back tomorrow, and David Katz, the former federal prosecutor, will be here. Can you hear our closing music, everybody? I love our closing music. I love production elements, so for me, it's a big thing. Music opens, announce. I love all that stuff. So the word tomorrow is be here. By then, hopefully our StreamYard platform will be back up. It's been off across the board for many shows. And David Katz will join us. We will talk about the law and the legal problems that this country may have and this president and administration may have trying to pursue this level of control over America's cities. Thank you for the support. Thank you for everything. And now, as we say goodbye,
I'm Shadow Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
Out of time. Bye-bye.
I would say this is Mark Thompson Show Unplugged. We'll do it plugged back in tomorrow. And until then, bye-bye.